Hi guys, Daz at Race Centre here. Today I'm going to talk about a subject that is super critical, probably frustrates the crap out of me, to be honest. I shouldn't say that, but yeah, the questions that come on and some of the theories that are out there about this subject sometimes can be pretty wild. It is a super important subject, particularly for track riding, particularly in winter. We're going to talk about front tyre pressures, particularly. We're not going to talk about the rear tyre pressure today, just front tyre pressure. The biggest factor that's overlooked, especially in cold weather, is we talk about track temperature, and people are, paying $300–400 for an infrared temperature gauge to measure the track temperature. But we're not talking about the wind, the air temperature. The air temperature is the biggest, I'll say the biggest factor when it comes to front tyre pressure, and this concept of cold front tyre, lost the front because it's cold. There's only a half truth in that, actually. If you think about it, if you were doing 200 kilometres and you stuck your head out the window of a car and it was 5 degrees outside, how cold that air would be. I mean, your eyes would water and the water would almost, nearly freeze. That's what your front tyre is seeing when you're on a racetrack. Sure, it's connected to the ground and there might be some friction creating some heat, but there is this massive wind blast, often at over 200 kilometres an hour, of freezing cold wind. It's the same wind that your radiator sees. It cools your engine, and in winter we've got to tape up our radiator because it gets so cold. That front tyre is getting that. So if you think about it, you're in your pit box, you got your bike on stands and you got a tyre warmer on it. And generally, industry standard is that front tyre is being heated up to 80 degrees, right? So that tyre, you've been sitting there on the warmers for 1 hour, you take the warmer off, the tyre's at 80 degrees, you start rolling out, you go out on the track, you start doing your laps, and it's copping this massive wind blast. Do you think it's going to stay at 80 degrees? No chance. Even a rider of the massive ability of Danny Pedrosa in MotoGP, and he always struggles when it's cold because he can't keep front tyre temperature. All right, so even at his level, that fast, on cold days, he can't, and on the best bikes in the world with the best tyres, he can't keep enough front tyre temperature. So if you think that, if you're doing a track day and you're going to keep the heat in that tyre, you're dreaming. Another concept that goes with that is there's this idea out there that if it's cold, you run your front tyre pressure even lower so that you create flex in the tyre and more friction and generate heat. I can tell you that if it's like, especially in the warmer climates, it's not a problem for you guys, but down in places like we are here in Victoria, if you go to Phillip Island in winter or cold days in Broadford, anywhere where it's cold, if you're dealing with a day and it's only 12 degrees outside, when you're out on track, that tyre's getting cold, you let your tyre down a bit, it's not going to generate much more heat. Whatever that extra friction is doing to generate more heat, that cold wind is going to counter it massively. You cannot beat that cold wind. So you have to actually learn to work with it. And I want to talk about tyre structure. So it's not just about, keeping the tyre temperature right. There's also a component of the front tyre that provides stability and structure. And that comes from your pressure. But if you were to imagine, say the optimum pressure for that is 34 psi. If I then went out and ran it at 15 psi, I'm going to get this squashy, unstable feeling. If I try to push really hard into the corner, it's going to push and likely I'm going to crash. If I, and let's not worry about temperature at the moment, let's say the tyre's at its optimum temperature. If I decided that, I'm going to go out at 15 psi, optimum temperature, and push as hard as I would when it's at 34, I'm going to crash because the tyre's flat. And when, I won't go into massive detail on this, but when a tyre's flat, the bike, motorcycles rely massively on what's called trail for stability, and we'll do another video on that because it's a bit in depth. But when that tyre's flat, you've lost all stability. You will even lose rear grip. The bike will feel weird. You'll have no confidence in it. It'll just feel crap. So having a flat tyre is worse than having a tyre that's a bit cold. What happens, so getting on this concept of cold front tyre crashes. More often than not, the crash is happening because the tyre is flat and you've lost trail, not because it's so cold. If you've got let's take the example again, 34 PSI, front tyre warmer at 80 degrees. You set that out, you go around Phillip Island, you do 5 laps. I assure you that tyre, if it's a 12-degree day or even 10 degrees and freezing wind, that tyre's probably dropped from 80 degrees, lucky to be 45. And your pressure, you'll find, is not 34 anymore, it's like 28 or 27. And then you come out of Siberia, go left, and then flick hard right for the hay shed, load the bike so much, and you put all this load into the front tyre, and it's flat. Lose the front. It's more to do with it being under pressure than it has to do with it's lost its tyre temperature. Tyre temperature is important, but you can only control it so much. I've seen heaps of videos out and concepts out about all these different ways to work the tyre harder to keep heat into it. Something that people don't talk enough about is actually selecting the right tyre. You can't use a tyre that's designed for hot conditions and heaps of front end load on a freezing cold day. So if we take the Pirelli family, for example, they've got an SC2 front that's designed for hotter conditions. You would be a fool to be running an SC2 front at Phillip Island in winter. Use an SC1. The SC1 is designed for colder conditions. So selecting the right tyre for your temperature conditions is super important. Way more important than letting it down to try and generate more heat and so on. So you must select the right tyre for the conditions. So, and on that, like a Pirelli SC1 front, like we've done heaps of testing, they provide heaps of grip even when they're only 40 degrees. That's fine. Like if the tyre surface is 40 degrees and it's got the right structure and stability, you can go super fast and you're not losing the front. But if that tyre's 40 degrees and it's flat, you're going to have a crash. So on the pressures, we actually use variable rate IRC tyre warmers here at Race Centre. And if we are riding in winter, like at the moment it's freezing, even though I've got a vest on, I'm inside, we set that front tyre warmer to 55 degrees in the pit box. We don't set it to 80 and let it cool down. We set it to 55. And so if we were at Phillip Island, we'd probably set it to 50. The reason for that is tyre warmers aren't there to get your tyre as hot as it can. The purpose isn't to bake eggs on the bloody things. It's to try and replicate the temperature they see on the racetrack. Right? So if this tyre is only going to get to 50 degrees on the racetrack, why heat it up more than that? It's about stable, having stable temperature and stable pressures. So the way that you learn that over time is by, when you come into the pit box, if you've got someone helping you, it's awesome, but even when you're on your own, come into your pit box, put your bike on the stand, the first thing you do is get this tyre pressure gauge and chuck it on your front tyre and get a reading. So if you don't have variable warmers, don't stress too much, but if you were to go out, say, and you put your front tyre warmer on, it's a cold day, you set it at 38 PSI and you wanted to keep it at 38, let's just say that number. And you go out, you do your first session, feeling okay, but you're not pushing super hard. Then you come in, put the bike on the stand and you put your tyre pressure gauge on, and lo and behold, it's 32 PSI instead of 38. All that's telling you, it was hot on the warmer. When you circulated, it gradually cooled down. And 32 is what it had when you came in, so it was probably running about 33 on track. If in that situation you wanted 38 or say 36, or you wanted it to be closer to 38, and you don't have a variable warmer, all you do next session pump it up, and so that when you leave it's 42 psi. So by the time you're circulating, it'll probably come in 36, 37, which is where you want to be. And if you check that, you just keep an eye on it every session that you come in, and then there's different days, you'll eventually learn how to read your front tyre and know that if you don't have a variable warmer, there's nothing you can do about it. So you set a higher pressure, and by the time you get up to speed, it'll drop to the pressure you want it. Certainly no different to V8 supercars. They don't even run tyre warmers. They actually, in the pit box, start with lower pressures because they know they'll get heat because they haven't got the tyre warmer. So what we're doing in that situation is just reverse of that, anticipating the on-track pressure. So super important. Any tyre pressure guides we give, there's some concept out there, start with this cold, or this is the pressure off the warmer. The only pressure that pressure that really matters. The pressure that is the most important is what they come in at. That's your target, because that's what gives you the best indication of what they are on the racetrack. And then you just manage the either drop or rise that you're getting from the pit box to the track, if that makes sense. So just to give you a bit of a guide, if we were riding Broadford this time of year, we'd be definitely using SC1 Pirelli fronts. We would not be even thinking about an SC2. And we would probably be aiming for about 36 to 37 off-track PSI. And with variable rate warmers, we'd be setting it to about 55 degrees. If we didn't have a variable rate warmer and the front warmer was around 80 degrees, we'd be starting at about 40, 41 PSI and knowing that it'll drop to about 36, 37. And just mention a little bit about the tyre construction itself. Fair to say, if this tyre is hotter, like in summer, the rubber's more malleable and the construction. So if my summer pressure was 38 PSI is my target, when it's a freezing day, I would probably target 36 PSI. And that's not so that it flexes more and generates heat. It's just because the rubber's harder, because it's colder. So I want to keep the same effect in the tyre, because the tyre actually acts as part of your suspension too. So that's really important. One of the things we've learnt over the years massively, and especially if you've ever had situations where you're feeling awesome on your bike, it's been a few months, you go and ride and you feel crap. A lot of the time that's just because when you rode last it was hot and now it's cold. And you haven't managed this tyre pressure properly, and it's not you, it's not like, oh, I'm not comfortable, it's in my head, all that stuff. There's actually physics behind why you're feeling uncomfortable. The tyre's flat. So if you need more info, give us a call, hit us up. Happy to discuss it. If you see us at the track, please don't hesitate to come and ask if you need a little bit of advice about tyre pressures.